It's likely Rafai must have been seizing upon all the wild conspiracy theories that were also afloat in the Middle East at the time, but also when considering timing and circumstance of when Buka first discovered Rafai in September of 1999, already being 3 months until the upcoming Y2K 2000 New Year's Eve events, with the Millennium Plot thwarted at the Canadian-US border in Washington State, also having links to New York and the East Coast. But also 2 months before Buka's discovery in July of 1999, consider the foreboding prediction that was revealed by the FBI ATF informant Randy Glass, who was involved in a 2-year-long sting operation known as Operation Diamondback, on Egyptian arms dealers and legal experts, as well as a Pakistani ISI agent named Raja Ghulam Abbas, who on several occasions these dealers boasted to Glass about having connections to the Taliban and Osama bin Laden, and described Americans as the enemy. Abbas also said to Glass while at a meeting at the Tribeca Grill in New York on July 22nd, "We would have no problem with blowing up this entire restaurant because it is full of Americans," and after dinner walked outside the restaurant and pointed in the direction of the World Trade Center and said,
"Those towers are coming down."
If this was just a foreboding prediction solely intended about hijacked airliners kamikazing into the Twin Towers, how would Abbas know that plane crashes alone were going to bring down the Twin Towers? Furthermore, even conventionally blaming the demolitions on Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden was a perfectly good option in the first few days after the September 11th attacks, considering that if the mainstream media had not devoted their efforts to promoting a fire collapse option, blacking out the extended coverage or reruns of the destruction of the Twin Towers, as well as blacking out explosive witness testimonies. But despite the mainstream media's effort to suppress, at the same time, they mistakenly reported stories about insider trading through European stock markets and shareholders by bin Laden associates, specifically on business and properties inside the World Trade Center, holding insurance policies on it, essentially profiting off the attacks.
German regulators have asked the FBI and CIA to help them with an ongoing German investigation into short selling on reinsurance stocks in the 4 days prior to the attack. Reinsurance companies are companies that are secondary insurers who take the big risks on a major disaster, for instance. And apparently German regulators were looking into whether a Munich reinsurance company, which holds a considerable amount of risk on the World Trade Center, was in fact sold short by associates of bin Laden. Now, there may not be an American component on this because it is not clear at all that the Munich Reinsurance Company trades on any exchanges here in the United States. But what would be an American component is whether they deposit money in American banks, whether there are American depository receipts for this Munich Reinsurance Company. There's also been reporting in the Italian press today that investigators in France and in Italy are looking as well at other secondary insurers in those countries.
All of which points to the certainty that the Twin Towers were going to be completely destroyed without solely counting on hijacked airliner crashes. Because neither side could have dreamed the official narrative that the Boeing 767 planes and subsequent fires would have brought both Twin Towers down in complete structural failures. If we, the American public and other officials, didn't initially think the Twin Towers were going to totally collapse, then neither should Al-Qaeda. If it sounds implausible that Middle Eastern suspects could not have been prepared or are experienced enough to organize and conduct a demolition operation on September 11, 2001, think again when there's plenty of items that have been overlooked when it comes to the first attack in 1993. As already aforementioned, with Trade Center bombing ringleader Mahmoud Abu Halina fleeing and was found in possession of a book on rapid demolition and destruction of buildings in his residence before being extradited back to the U.S. Consider the fact that another associate in his inner circle, the Sudanese Tariq al-Hassan, charged in the New York landmark plot, resided at an apartment at 390 East 8th Street, where one of the tenants there said, according to the New York Times, June 26, 1993, Afghan Wars Web Encircles a Militant Islamic Movement by Francis X. Kleins, that in the week following the Trade Center bombing they saw the blind sheikh visit the building 3 times, carried up the stairs to the apartment of one of a dozen Muslim families in the building. Another resident, speaking on the condition of anonymity, said that the building attracted scores of Muslim men several years ago during the Afghan war, and some told of their war exploits. You'd ask them what are their specialties in the army, and they'd say demolition experts, the resident related. Building managers stressed that the Muslim families were law-abiding, and they denied that they allowed the building to become a safe house for militants, as one resident complained. If resources such as demolition expertise and blueprints isn't enough, Perhaps maybe inside familiarity or reconnaissance of the Twin Towers might make you reconsider otherwise.
The latest connection between the suspects in the most recent bombing plot and the World Trade Center is that the alleged ringleader of the latest group actually worked as a security guard there. Siddiq Ibrahim Siddiq Ali allegedly lists a job working for the federal government at One World Trade Center in the offices of the Federal Home Loan Bank in his resume. In that resume, he boasts he was responsible for, quote, monitoring electronic surveillance systems and traffic surveillance of the premises.
The main Sudanese conspirator, Siddiq Ali, should also be considered in the modus operandi ability since he worked as a guard for National Kidney Security at the Federal Home Loan Bank on the 103rd floor of the North Tower from August 1988 to December 1990.
Hi, this is the Liberation Army.
The letter, which was also received as a voice recording from Nadel Ayad, was written on behalf of Ramzi Youssef's 5th Battalion Liberation Army and is signed by an Arabic-sounding alias. If our demands are not met, all of our functional groups in the Army will continue to execute our missions against military and civilian targets in and out of the United States. It lists a series of demands, including an end to diplomatic relations with Israel and an end to interfering with any of the Middle Eastern countries' interior affairs.
The letter, which included an ambiguous return address scrawled in Arabic, contains a typed explanation for the blast. It says, "This action was done in response for the American political, economical, and military support to Israel." It continues with a vague threat to unspecified nuclear targets and claims our Army has more than 150 suicidal soldiers. The letter's signed Liberation Army 5th Battalion.
But according to the New York Times, December 15, 1993, a copy of the letter will be found in the search of Nadel Ayad's home, but within his computer files, an additional letter was deleted but retrieved by an FBI computer specialist where it listed further threats. We are the Liberation Army 5th Battalion again. Unfortunately, our calculations were not very accurate this time. However, we promise you that the next time it will be very precise, and the World Trade Center will continue to be one of our targets in the U.S. unless our demands are met. As you know, our demands were revealed to New York Times, Post, and Daily News. Perhaps not enough of a threat or sign for law enforcement or national security to have taken more seriously, when the intentions and motives are still laid out clearly that the World Trade Center remains a target, promising precise accuracy for total destruction. Which is why, from what we've covered in previous films and written work about the case of the 5 Middle Eastern suspects linked to Denko Mechanical and Magic Heating and Air having prior and unauthorized access to the Twin Towers just days before September 11th, and were arrested months later in Tennessee on a sting for fraudulent IDs, which was subsequent to the FBI's 9/11 dragnet. That case in Tennessee should make one reconsider the Port Authority more as suspect or needed inquiry rather than just leaseholders of the World Trade Center complex, which is not conclusive for implication in September 11th, since it seems common that most have looked the easy way out, rushing to judgment by implying Larry Silverstein as part of their conspiracy conclusion, which in winning the bid and in retrospect is late to the game since it neglects the fact that despite Silverstein's chosen ethnicity, he didn't own the Twin Towers in 1993 and neither in 1999 during the Millennium Plot. And coming back to the cusp and pre- and post-millennium, all before September 11th, what Rafai and other Middle Eastern insiders may have known, or not, doesn't absolve any of the Mossad apparatus that's been uncovered on the Jersey side at the bare minimal. But all sets of foreign and radical conspirators must be fairly analyzed or considered. And what World Trade Center janitor William Rodriguez witnessed on 9/11 and before is not to be ignored either. Because aside from the 9/11 Commission report, omitting his graphic testimony for explosives, they also left out that Rodriguez had witnessed Flight 175 hijacker Mohand al-Shari scoping out the building in June 2001, a couple of months prior to the attacks. According to what Rodriguez told New York Daily News in June 2004, under the headline, "Janitor Tells 9/11 Panel of Brush with World Trade Center Thug." Despite the already aforementioned, it's not a surprise the details of this Rodriguez and al-Shari encounter are covered up, but it's more surprising that it's obscure and virtually an unknown incident in the research field and movement of 9/11 truth. But the bottom line here is that it would be gross negligence to ignore all of Rodriguez, just as it would be ignoring Peter Lance's story on Ronnie Bucca, regardless if Lance's total conclusion blames the Al-Qaeda network, because his pursuit to connect both 1993 World Trade Center bombing to 9/11 through Ramzi Youssef and the Bojinka plot is certainly one angle that this presentation has counted on. And similarly, like with the International Herald Tribune questioning the role of Josie Hadass, FBI spokesman Joe Valquit had put down Lance's story of Rafai infiltrating the New York Fire Department after his first book, 1,000 Years of Revenge, was released, saying that it's rehash of old stories, gossip, and speculation.